Stockholm Institute of Peace Research. So I think one of the things for of importance is to join this environmental concern, which people naturally feel, and it's very important, with the peace concern and preventing war, because it is the same struggle. And when I've spoken at green gatherings, as I used to do way back even in the 80s, and I've always made this point, and it's why the Green Party in Britain is so strong on peace issues. Caroline Lucas knows what I'm talking about, and she's MP for Brighton, my favourite city in Britain. But because of the anomalous voting system we have in the UK, she's the only single MP from the Green movement. But there are others who, from the Liberal Democrats and other parties, Labour and even some Conservatives, who realise the importance of environmental issues. And they were all, there. And there was a very good debate in Parliament. But none of them were making seriously the connection to peace. It's as if, I don't know, the elephant in the room and nobody mentions it. That has to be brought out. Now, the relation between that and Bremain studies is that I think the single biggest argument, well, there are so many arguments I can't begin, but one of the biggest arguments for opposing Brexit and staying in the European Union is to work with the European Union to strengthen our peace-making, peace-giving facilities. I mean, the European Union won the Nobel Prize for Peace. I've been working with them to try and get a mediation service set up, officially recognised within the European Union, to mediate civil wars around the planet, and especially countries neighbouring to Europe and the Mediterranean region. It's in Europe's interest that peace should reign. And the European Union was created as a haven for peace. And those who seek to destroy it come from quite a violent and destructive perspective. They've not thought it through. They haven't got a clue about the importance of peace. They're the kind of thinkers who think in terms of victory and militarism. And if you look at the rhetoric and the ideas of people like Steve Bannon and Farage and their cronies, it's all about, victory, winning, defeating. They're sort of, military types. And Farage says, I'm going to pick up a rifle if we don't get Brexit. These people are just soldiers. They're warriors. Well, thank you, you're important, but stand down. I'm saying to these warriors, stand down. What you're doing is dangerous and is going to unleash absolute catastrophe. I'm speaking as a, archdruid here. In the old Celtic world, the warriors listened to us. It's time these warriors that are all shouting for Brexit started to really listen again to the intellectuals and the thinkers and the academics and the druids. So that's important, the link between, the wonderful sort of activism of the environmentalist movement, but it needs to understand that it's 100% the same struggle as the peace movement. Greenpeace, we should put the peace back into Greenpeace. And with the work of the CND and other peace campaigning groups, they're getting gradually to the place where it's becoming more and more unacceptable to have and develop nuclear weapons. We need a planetary-wide ban. We have it through the UN. We have to actualise that. And some states that are reluctant to do that, who have nuclear weapons, like the UK, like Israel, like America, like France even, which still keeps its nuclear weapons, they have to put these on the table as part of a global Green New Deal. You can't have Macron saying on the one hand, we want France to be the pioneer of ecology and so on, and yet selling weapons to Saudi Arabia in secret, which he prosecutes journalists if they find out about. You can't have such double standards and get away with it anymore, because we live in a liberal democratic world with freedom of information. And so you have to have transparency and integrity as a politician now, and you have to tell the truth to the people. What has concerned me about the Brexit thing is the whole thing is a brew of lies, So that's what we'll be studying in the Centre for Bremain Studies. And like I say, you're welcome to get involved and get in contact. I want to end with just a philosophical point, because it's Sunday and I'm fasting and it's a week after Christmas. Why bother with why not just, retire and cultivate your garden, as Voltaire said? Just have an easy life. Well, no, because the thing is, when you are able to discern right from wrong, when you got to a point in your soul's evolution where you can see ethics, and understand dharma, the causal links between events, as the Jains say, everything is made of karma, and once you reach a certain level of enlightenment, you can see the karmic connections between things. So I think one has a duty to share that. Simply as a doctor, as a medical doctor, if a patient comes into your surgery who's in the middle of cutting his hand off, you're going to try and stop them, and probably refer them to some kind of psychiatrist. One of the very earliest of seers or sages known to the planet's history was Zoroaster, and he left us only a few songs. He was very much like a druid or a seer who left these gathas, as they're called. And I'm going to end by just reading a couple of verses. Okay, this is from song number 14, one of the gathas, called Removing Obstructions. And wise one, you guard in your abode this good mind, the souls of the righteous, and the reverence that comes with serenity and invocation. A fact that makes the great sovereignty everlasting. It's just one little verse, but what Zoroaster tells us is to cultivate, righteousness, cultivate righteous mind, wisdom, and that is the only antidote against ignorance and evil. And in Zoroastrian philosophy, evil arises because of lies, drudge. All the evil of the world has come because of lies. So please stop lying. Politicians, rulers, statesmen, everybody, let's just stop lying and live in truth. And that way, this era of peace, what I call the Seishantic era, because the Zoroastrians believe that the Seishant is coming to bring peace, but nobody quite knows when or where. And I'm saying, well, it's not just a person, it's a state of being for the planet as a whole. It's a state of consciousness, it's a state of enlightenment. The Enlightenment in European history was the beginning, the first glimmers of that Seishantic era. And it had occurred in other places, Tang, China, India during the time of Buddha and Mahavira, and so on. Andalusia, when Cordoba was the capital. These are times of great intellectual achievement, when people rise above their rivalry and their ego-based anger and violence. And the ego is transcended, and you come to this place of righteousness, which is for everybody's benefit. So what you want is wisdom and enlightenment and love for all of mankind, not just for your tribe or your people or your religion or whatever. Anyway, I commend you to read the Thoughts of Zarathustra, and Nietzsche kind of wrote about him, but didn't really understand him. Bless him. Nietzsche was a learned man, but not a very transcendentally learned. He stopped at a certain point in his own intellectual evolution, in my opinion, because of his illness. It was very sad. But there was a very interesting man called Thomas Davidson, who was a Scottish philosopher, who was a bit like me, a kind of polymath, travelled around the world, taught in America, taught in Italy, and he'd studied every single religion that you can get your hands on in depth, like me. Also, he was a friend of very modern thinking Roman Catholic intellectuals in Italy, and he was a friend of William James in America. And anyway, he set up this group called the Brotherhood of the New Life, which founded the Fabian Society, which in turn founded the London School of Economics and Political Science, which is where I've studied part of my degree. And this man, Thomas Davidson, he wrote many wonderful books that, nobody's ever heard of him, but it's people like that behind the scenes that do good work without needing public glory or reward. They're why we're still here as a planet. And by founding the LSE, these people, I think, advanced political science. So the work I'm doing with the Centre for Bremain Studies is coming from that lineage. Now, dear old Thomas Davidson said, people don't realise, but the hosts of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, are still governing history. You can if you listen carefully, you can still invoke the help of the angels, is what Thomas Davidson said, and I would still. So I refer people to study his work, and if he were alive today, I'm sure he'd be absolutely campaigning against the inanities of Brexit, because he was a great Europhile. He travelled all over Europe. He loved it. Scottish too. And he would be for Scottish independence if Brexit is forced down their throats. As Nicola Sturgeon has come out and said, if Brexit goes ahead, there'll be a second referendum by 2021. And, I know obviously the Theresa May inane cabal will try and stop them, and whatever, people are, pretend to be running Britain, but they won't be able to succeed in international law and in the law of the UK, the Constitution. They will fail, and Scotland will secede. It's as simple as that. I know because I lived in Scotland, and I resonate with the needs and aspirations of the Scottish people, as well as with all the other people of the UK. And the only way to satisfy them all is to stay inside the European Union. Anyway, that's my proposition, my hypothesis. I will be hopefully demonstrating this in a more rigorous and scientific way. Now I want to finish with a final quote from Cicero, he's one of the sages we celebrate here today in the Museum of Peace. He is in my list of universal sages and saints. He was a Roman intellectual, trained as a lawyer. He studied philosophy omnivorously. He travelled in Greece. He became governor of Turkey, or what they called Anatolia then. And he was based in Tarsus, which is where only a few years later St. Paul was born. And he helped endow a huge library in Tarsus of 177,000 books, scrolls, of all the classics of philosophy. Cicero read them all. He knew Plato like the back of his hand, Aristotle, and the Stoics, who'd come along after Aristotle in about the 3rd century BC to try and reconcile and integrate all known thought into a cosmic unity, a synthesis. And the Stoics argued that there is a cosmic law, there's a cosmic mind behind everything. There's a cosmic intelligence, actually, that has created mankind. We're here because of that, and created nature and the environment and this planet. And that our duty as philosophers and natural philosophers, because the Stoics advocated science, physics to them was one branch of philosophy, and then there was ethics, which is another branch of philosophy, and then there was logic, which is another branch. And by pursuing all three together, you're doing service to the cosmic mind that underlies all of history. And my opposition to the Brexit fiasco is it's not doing service to the cosmic mind that underlies all of history. It's opposing it. It's a fake cult that has been engineered into being for the wrong reasons by the wrong people at the wrong time. And I think Cicero would be jumping up and down if he were alive today, saying, for God's sake, Britain, don't leave us, we love you, you're part of Europe, and Scotland, we love you, Cicero was omnicurious. He wrote an amazing book on divination. He loved the Druids, he loved the understanding that some people can peer into the future. Well, how do they do that, he said? What are prophets? How can prophets know the future? And he tries to explain it in terms of physics. And he says, well, it's not, because God is going to show you by the tea leaves in your cup, a pattern that God is rustling the water at this moment. No, it doesn't work like that. If it works at all, said Cicero, and he gives loads of examples of signs, as he calls them, whereby, apparently on the day that Caesar was to be killed, there were all kinds of terrible signs which Caesar ignored, because he was so arrogant by then that he thought, well, I'm beyond that, the gods, they can give me whatever signs they want, I'm going to ignore them. And look what happened to him. Cicero opposed Caesar, but after Caesar seized power and took over, he accommodated to him, because Caesar was a powerful intellect, and there was a mutual respect between them. And then when Caesar was assassinated, eventually Mark Antony and Augustus took over as a triumvirate with Lepidus, and Mark Antony had Cicero killed. Augustus tried to prevent this and talked apparently for 2 days, all the arguments against it. But Mark Antony said, no, we're going to kill Cicero. That was a crime against an intellectual. He should have been made a professor of higher education at Rome. And a lot died with him. But enough of his writings survived that we have some precious writings. And this volume contains his work on divination, and it also contains his work on the nature of the gods. And it's a beautiful, they're amazing writings. They should be studied and taught much more. And Cicero is a typical international intellectual who I respect because of his pan-Europeanism. He knew that wisdom is not a monopoly of the Romans, it's not a monopoly of the Greeks, it's not a monopoly of the Celts or the Germans. He knew about all these peoples, but there's aspects of wisdom in them all. And his vision, his largesse of mind, inspired St. Paul in his writings, and I'm also doing a commentary on St. Paul at the moment in the book of Colossians, which is a town in Asia Minor not far from Tarsus. And Paul knew Asia Minor very well. I mean, he was at home in that Hellenistic, stoical environment. And for him, Christianity, at its best, is a kind of fulfillment of that Hellenistic dream of